Welcome to another episode of Mums on a Mission with your host, Julie Hatch. I'm so glad you're here today as we talk about some more things about kids in general. And I have asked this woman to be with me today to be interviewed, Alison Van Keuren. And I've asked her to join me today because she has a lot of experience, both professional and personal, with kids, and specifically kids education, way to best educate them. Alison works as a program coordinator and a learning specialist at a local Montessori school. She has degrees in psychology and occupational therapy and recent training in Orton-Gillingham. She spent the school year of 2020 to 2021, which we're all very familiar with. She spent homeschooling 2 of her children while the 3rd child continued in the traditional school system. Is that right, Alison? Is that accurate?
That is
Okay.
correct. Yeah.
Alison will be telling us about her personal experience with different education modalities and her professional experience in the Montessori system. So welcome, Alison. Thank you for joining me again today.
Thank you. I love coming.
I know, well, we both love talking about kids and education with kids. So let me just start off by asking you if you can tell us a little bit about your experience as a homeschool parent that would be beneficial to all the parents listening, and how kids may benefit from homeschooling. And as a second part to that, how kids may benefit from something like a Montessori type of education. That's kind of a lot to put in one question, but whatever you can do with it.
Sure. Sure. We landed in homeschooling primarily because of the situation of COVID and the change in education at the time, but it wasn't something we hadn't considered without the pandemic being a
Uh-huh.
factor. We had thought about it. We had thought about it in terms of traveling on our sailboat. That had been a plan that we were putting into the works for a few years. But as the children got older and life changed, that wasn't what we chose to do over the past couple of years. And we stayed home, but we still did the homeschooling and we tried that out. I feel like it was a great stop and pause
Mm,
at a time that we needed it very much. Having that been last year, now that homeschooling's in the past and we're back in the school system, I love the thought of it being okay and recognizing that sometimes in life, not just for adults, but for children too, they just might need a shift or they
mm,
might need a stop and reassess how everything's going, try something new,
mm.
do something alternative to help with whatever stage that they're in, and that can make all the difference.
That's a pretty brave thing to do, to stop and be willing to shift and have everyone look at things in a different perspective. It's a very smart idea, but it's brave too, to sort of upset the
Right.
apple cart maybe.
And it felt like it was, nerve-wracking a little bit nerve-wracking to do it, to take yourself out of that system and trust it. So in the moment, I still felt we had those expectations and we needed to do certain things at a certain time or in a certain way. And now that that's all in our past and I reflect upon it, I realized that it could have taken many forms,
Yeah,
shapes, sizes, and that any of them would have been valid and valuable.
yeah,
That any way that we chose to take that path would have a benefit. And that is leads me into educational systems
uh-huh,
that I recognize, we all do things, we all have our priorities, and different school systems have their different priorities, and certain school systems are going to be a match for some and maybe not the best match for others. Um, I was just thinking about it the other day about families who take special time occasionally out of school. School
yeah,
systems don't love that, but
yeah,
maybe they say, I'm going to take my child out for their birthday and do fun things with them and make it just the day for the child. And my son was saying, could we do that for my birthday? And I said, well, I don't love the idea of missing school because it does take away some of the rhythm. So I rather do something like that on a Saturday.
yeah,
But it doesn't mean that it's not extremely important for that other family. And
yeah.
I said, it's something they choose to do, and I want to value that for them.
Mhm.
because there's no right or wrong for people really, and the school wants to impose, rules to have the kids in school, and those rules make sense because you want kids to have that. It's important working in the school. If they do miss a day here and there, it does kind of cause them to get behind and cause some angst at times.
Yeah.
That being said, if that's a priority of the family, I want to honor that for the family as well. It's just
Yeah.
being respectful for people with what's important to them and where their priorities lie.
Yeah. Well, that is important, and that's really wide thinking, open-minded thinking this, which is nice. So can you talk a little bit about the Montessori system? What its priorities are?
Yes, I would love to. I'm new to the Montessori system. I say new as an employee. I have been a parent of Montessori in the past, just for the preschool model. And I enjoyed it when they were in the preschool model, but being a part of it, it's meaning so much more to me
Mm,
because I'm getting to understand the ins and outs. So I don't have formal Montessori training. I bring my learning specialist skills to the school, and the school is wonderfully teaching me the philosophies as we go along. And one thing about Montessori is that you feel the philosophies more than you learn them on paper. You can
yeah.
really see it and feel it, and it's subtle and it's wonderful.
Yeah.
Um, One of the first things I noticed and really enjoyed was that all of the teachers and the children go by first name.
Uh-huh.
And it struck me because I found that we're all equal,
Yeah.
of the respect of being very equal. So I really enjoy having these young children call me by my first name, and that's a form of respect in this
Interesting.
school.
That's really quite different from regular people would otherwise say, no, it's more respectful to say Mrs. So and so or Ms. So and so. But I love that idea of equality.
Right. It takes away that piece that we all have something to share, that everything that we want to put out has value, and the children teach the teachers as much as the teachers teach the
Yeah. Oh,
children.
that's
And
beautiful.
so why would we call someone by a name that would not promote that equality?
Right.
So I do very much enjoy that piece. Um, the other phrase that we ring true all the time is meeting the children where they're at.
Uh-huh.
And as the learning specialist, I get to have the opportunity to recognize sometimes or question with the teachers, and they do this continuously, is are we meeting the child where they're at? So
Uh-huh.
you may think that you are and you're on a track, and then you start to really recognize something, which is another philosophy for Montessori is to very much observe, that you're never not observing the learning that's going on, the community that's happening. So it's going to shift, but you're always going to be observing for change
Mm-hmm.
and then adapting for that change. So it's not just getting a picture of someone in the beginning of the school year and saying, I'm going to meet that child where they're at, because that's going to be continually changing throughout the year.
Yeah. Wow. Now, when you say meeting the child where they're at and you're a learning specialist, I don't know if that means that you work one-on-one with kids. Every single child in the Montessori, the school gets enough individual attention that they are met where they're at and gets reevaluated for that?
Well, as a learning specialist, there's a separate program.
Okay.
So it's children who have some identified needs of some more one-to-one attention beyond the one-to-one attention that happens naturally
Okay.
in a Montessori school. Um, and so then that leads to some one-to-one sessions for some really explicit training. And then also integrated into the classrooms. So I get to be in all of the classrooms as well as having children one-to-one. Um, so I can also work with children in the classroom,
Right.
aren't in the program, and just be able to collaborate with the teachers, on something that could be a shift for that child in the classroom that they don't necessarily to have one-to-one service,
Yeah.
um, to go over any of those needs. Um, but meeting them where they're at can mean so much. So it could be academically, it could be socially, it could be emotionally, and just finding that one or two like big part that's causing them to not be ready to learn can
Yeah.
make all the difference. And
Yeah.
it's often not what you think about why they're not participating in something or why they're getting stuck on something. So just allowing them to feel comfortable enough to reveal what is actually causing them to have a hard time with their learning.
Yeah.
And so you just have to be open to being surprised that it's not what
Yeah.
you thought, you know.
That's great. This sort of, I think, leads into another part that I want to just touch on. We'll come back to the different kinds of school systems, but there's a term that I think most parents may be familiar with, IEP, for an individual education program. And in my experience, and back when my kids were younger, it had a negative connotation. It meant that the child was lacking in some way and they needed special attention because they couldn't keep up with the rest of the class, or they were different from the rest of the class, or whatever it was. When in fact, and when I say, somebody said to me recently, and it's probably you, that
Mhm.
early intervention, or not individual, not early intervention, individual education plan, every child could use that because every child is different. They come to the classroom with different history of what happened the night before, the day before, whatever, at home, but they also come with different learning styles, different interests. And so I don't know if part of what you're talking about, a little bit of a individual education program for every single child, which is I think a great thing. I think that it's hard to have happen in the public schools with lots of numbers, but I don't know, how would you speak to that?
I absolutely agree that I feel, we personally went through some exploring to have some answers on just how our children learn. I can't tell you how valuable
Mm,
those assessments are, and that is the day that I realized, why doesn't every single child have this opportunity to know this information? Because so many of them are subtle,
yeah,
and to have the subtleties recognized to be able to shift how you approach a child and their learning. People can just say, there's something there. One of the teachers said to me, we would be for months saying there's something, but not really figure out what it is.
yeah,
And to have the information of doing full assessments just really pinpoints things, and it makes it so much easier for the child, and it's years sometimes that it takes off of years of struggle, and that leads to confidence. You
yeah,
really want to have the children have the confidence, and if they're feeling that they're hitting something repeatedly and they just get frustrated, they might avoid it, and
yeah,
then once you start avoiding things and you get gaps in your education, and then the next lesson's harder, and then you avoid that, and it's just goes on and on and on.
yeah,
So I do feel that it's extremely important, and all of those things like processing speeds and just how much time does it take to take in the information, and how much time do you need to reflect on it?
yeah,
How many times should you have it be repeated, or for another child, is repeating it going to cause frustration, so you need to
yeah,
move? So it's how much time are you going to spend on the information, and how many other pieces of material do you need to bring in to make connections, to make the meaning more rich, so that they understand it and don't forget it, that it
yeah,
becomes more memorable. And these are all just little nuances of teaching that have nothing to do with the material itself. It's the fashion in which you're delivering it. It's the
yeah. It's like a nice way of putting it, fashion, because I was going to say it's like an art, the science
Yeah,
and the art, really, of teaching.
yes.
And they're lucky to have you, because obviously, you're very sensitive and tuned into what needs to be done. So continuing on with Montessori, I'm sort of bouncing around here, but I think that you've mentioned that Montessori has a lot of community feeling to it.
It does very much, and there's a lot of encouragement for the children to go to a peer to ask for help if the teacher is not available.
Uh-huh.
The teachers have the opportunity to move around the room throughout the day, and the children have their lessons. So there are individual small group lessons that happen based on skill level.
Uh-huh.
So it's not the whole class learning the same material at the same time. And they're very much community, exercises that they do with everyone, but those are more on the lessons of being kind and being peaceful and respectful, and those are the full class lessons.
Yep.
And then the academic lessons are very individualized. They're in
Okay.
small groups, and then the work is independent. So once the children get their work plan, they follow through with their work. They have their work on the shelves, and they go through their list of what needs to be done, and they need to figure out how to get that done in the time that they have for their academics.
Yep.
And the teachers will rotate, but if the teacher is not available and they're working with someone else, a peer is, they're recommended to go find a peer
Uh-huh.
to get the answers, or to try to think of another way they could find their answers so that
Yeah.
it's right at their fingertips, and they have to do that critical thinking.
Yeah.
Uh,
That's
so it's
great.
very community based, and it's also multi-age.
Yeah.
So, it's the first through third years that work together, and then the 4 through 6 years in elementary, and then you also have the children's house. So they're mixed ages, and
Yeah.
so you can have leaders, and you can have role models, and they just help each other.
Yeah.
So it's a nice model.
It sounds like it works out well.
It does work out very
The whole
nicely.
going to a peer for wow. And then the
Yeah.
big class teaches that stuff that everybody, no matter what grade you're in, everybody benefits from and needs and uses. And it sounds like, say again what it is that they do. Respect for each other. What do they teach in the big classroom? What are the virtue or the qualities, I guess, the values of the Montessori?
Well, peaceful,
That's
it's
okay.
and one of the things I really love too is that if someone, children are silly, and children explore all sorts of different language and whatever else. And if it's not necessarily appropriate for school, you just kind of guide them. I love the word guiding. There's a lot of guiding that goes on. So you're gently guiding them, and just, oh, remember, we're a peaceful school, or that doesn't sound like something we might say in a peaceful school like ours. So
Uh-huh.
it's not directed at the child. It's reminding them of the community, and reminding them of the peace that happens
Oh,
at our school.
God,
And
that's beautiful.
so those are the words, that's the language that's used.
Yeah.
And
Wow. You must love working there.
yeah, it's very nice. It's
It
very
just
nice.
feels good hearing you talk about it. Um, so in the past, you and I also have talked about the traditional education system in our country. And just to voice a little bit of my opinion, I'm not saying this is your opinion at all, but I will ask you to speak on it if you would be willing to, is
Mhm.
that our traditional educational system here is pretty antiquated. It's designed to educate the masses rather than the individual. And again, kids are all different. They show up with different stuff and different ways of needing to learn, and none of it's good or bad. So what would I don't know, what's your feeling of, and you actually have said in the past that nothing is inherently good or bad. Montessori is not necessarily better than public. It all depends on the kid and the family and all that kind of stuff. But in general, many more kids go to public school than go to Montessori. Do you have any commentary or any comment, or what needs to shift in the public school system? I'm not being very specific here in my question.
Right. Well, it being away now for 2 years from the public school system, there are so many memories I have of recognizing golden nuggets, of really wonderful things that are happening in the public school also, um, that are unique to the public school. So there there is a there's a lot of work done on the curriculum, and they put a lot of thought into it.
Uh-huh.
Um, One of the harder things I have personally is that pace of things, and sort of the just getting through the day, and it sort of just happens in a whirlwind, and then the day is done. Um, that being said, I mean, there are times for reflection in the classroom. There are times of really wonderful learning, and the teachers are so good at taking their time, but they have so many things they need to fit in.
Yeah.
So um, they're not able to pick and choose to
Yeah.
sort of focus on a lesson for a longer period of time, or to really dig deep on something. that might really work for a child to stop and dig deep instead of just moving on to the next thing. And that's where it's just hard for me, is that, with all the standards, there's just
So it's not the individual teachers, it's the constraints of the big system that is being put on the teachers.
right.
Is that right?
Right. And it's a difficult thing because all of the standards have value. So,
Yeah,
I know that when you look at a big school system and you want everyone to have opportunity, so it still goes back to giving opportunity. So
yeah,
when children may not otherwise have opportunity to move forward, the public school gives them that opportunity and they do it well.
yeah,
They expose them to all of the standards that need to be given to them. But in doing that, we just don't have enough hours in the day
yeah,
to give all of the standards at a deeper meaning
yeah,
level,
sure.
um, with all of the reflection that could be useful and all of the connections that we could make across the board,
Yeah,
and teachers are doing their best out there to draw in current affairs, to use your local community
yeah,
to bring lessons to be deeper, but they are being asked to teach a lot of material in a short period of time.
yeah. And from friends of mine who are teachers saying that now with having to take mask breaks, it cuts into their work, their teaching even more so. It sounds like, yeah, a challenge, but certainly a challenge. And my respect for teachers has always been there, but really has grown during COVID.
Mhm.
Okay, so why would a family choose one form of education over the other, meaning public versus private versus homeschooling? And I don't know if Montessori falls in under the private. Anyways, all the various different systems. How would you help a family decide which is best for their kid, or why would they choose one over another?
There are so many reasons, I feel. um, and each area is going to have strengths, and they're going to be missing one of the other pieces,
Yep.
in um, so that's why I love that we've sort of had many different experiences, because we've been able to do them all and
Yeah.
have the various experiences, which has been a very rich overall experience, because they're trying new things, they're trying new methods, they're learning what works for them or what doesn't, and they're learning how to adapt into different school settings and different demands. Um, so I find value in all of them. That's
Mm-hmm.
one thing. But I would say if a child does have a learning style that requires them to have extra time,
Mm-hmm.
um, to be individualized, one who really benefits from small group, who gets distracted in a large group, who needs that feedback in a different way, that's not going to maybe get noticed in a larger classroom as often as it would in a smaller classroom, where there's more opportunity to see patterns in children. So if someone is at an emotional state where, there's too much social interaction in a very large classroom and it causes anxiety for them, or um, they just don't know how to communicate well and they need to have some prompting for that, so if is the unique needs of the child outside of their academic level,
Yeah.
um, something about their executive functioning skills come to mind, if organizing is difficult, if time management is difficult, and staying on track with work and organizing their material, if they're spending all of their energy trying to do all their executive functioning skills, they're going to miss the academic piece
Yeah.
because they're just trying to manage their day.
Yeah.
And somebody who has a lot of difficulty with transitions throughout the day may not be able to keep up as well. And they're focusing on, oh gosh, am I going to be the end of the line? And they're thinking, am I going to be in the end of the line? All this internal thinking is going on during a lesson,
Yeah. Yep.
and they may be missing the academic
Yeah.
piece. For kids like that, a smaller environment that has some more attention, that they don't have to worry as much, and they can just be settled in their bones and focus on what's going on in front of them for the academics.
Yeah. Yep. Makes me
But
think.
it's difficult because private schools are expensive, and you have to have the means, and some people are going to sacrifice some things to do the private school experience. But again, it comes back to family priorities.
Yeah.
Um, And, I was speaking to somebody recently, and a grown person, an adult, said that when they were younger, all their friends went on these fancy vacations. And she said, I would ask my parents, like, why can't we go to Disney World? And they said, well, you go to private school.
Yeah.
So,
Some,
you go back and forth, but if a family chooses to travel a lot, those children are learning a whole nother lesson about travel and
yeah.
going to different places and learning about that. So they're both equally valuable. So if one family wants to spend their money and take their children traveling, they're going to teach their children something about traveling and family time.
Yeah.
And if someone else chooses to put the money toward private school, those children are going to have a different learning experience and have
Yeah.
that value. So it comes down to what makes sense for a family, what their means are, what their priorities are at that moment, and it might change year to year.
Right.
Um, but I think it's just having people recognize that there are multiple opportunities out there, and just to recognize what might be good for their family, a good fit, and just to consider other options.
Right. And I would add, and I think that you can maybe also appreciate this too, back with what is right for the oldest child or one child is not necessarily right for the other children, because my oldest child went to private school because he was dying to learn and he just couldn't be satisfied. He just was eating up all the information. He needed a lot of stimulation, intellectual stimulation. And his younger brother, just because it was easier to send them all to the same school, he went, and it was totally the wrong fit for him. And then by the time the third one came along, we couldn't afford to keep him in the school. So the oldest one did great. He got everything that he needed. And then, but that's not what worked out for the subsequent two. So it's complicated. I know that you've had kids in different kinds of schools, and it's complicates things even more. However, I think that it's important to pay attention to what each individual child needs.
Yes, yes, and logistically, yes,
Yeah.
some are going to be in the environment that they should be more than others need to be, or vice versa. So, but that's how it's going to work out
Yep. And
for
we
some.
all do the best we can. That's one
Mhm.
thing mothers need to know, that they're doing the best that they
Exactly.
can.
Exactly.
You
Yes,
can't ask for much more than
100%.
that.
Yeah.
Um, okay. So one other thing I would love for you to talk to a little bit is Orton-Gillingham. I mentioned that you were trained in that recently, and I had never heard of it until recently. My sister got trained in it. And so if you could explain what it is, I think that it opens up a world of great learning for certain kinds of kids. Can you speak to explain about Orton-Gillingham?
Yes, yes, I would love to. So, becoming a learning specialist, my background is as an occupational therapist, but working with school age children, a lot of the academics cross over with the occupational therapy skills. And I was really wanting to go beyond the occupational therapy to sort of bridge that. I didn't know enough about the academic explicit teaching, um, that I thought there was value in it because it's all connected, all of the motor. And
Mm,
so Orton-Gillingham is multisensory learning. And so it really comes from, and so is Montessori. So
hmm.
they all really marry. Occupational therapy is very much a multisensory discipline. So it really made sense to me as I was doing the Orton-Gillingham. And I am amazed at how valuable it is to chunk the information and directly teach the phonetic sounds, the phonetic awareness, and spelling rules. And as a school, it was decided that Orton-Gillingham would be good across the board. So
Uh-huh.
it's, again, like IEPs you were saying, and individual testing. It's not just for those select few. Orton-Gillingham is also being recognized now to be, this is a classroom approach. So
Yeah.
that's how it's being used at our school right now,
Uh-huh.
as a classroom approach and for all. And then I get to, as a learning specialist, go into the depths of it and get
Hmm.
more fun with it and more detailed. Um, so I use it in the school for, a post spelling test. And so you really break down the words, and it's just another way to understand where it's all coming from. And you can
Yeah.
go with the Latin roots. But the patterns that come out of it, I look at words differently now.
Yeah.
Um, and it really does make a world of difference with communicating, with speaking, reading, writing, everything across the board. It helps you just think in a different way of how you segment words and how you use phonetics. So um, I think it's relieving for the children too, once they discover
Hmm.
what they didn't know and how they can use it in all of their work. So it
Yeah.
really does. It also teaches them, I feel, from what I've seen, to apply it to other things.
Yeah.
So as you're breaking down words, you can also think of math concepts by chunking them in a similar way that you chunk words in Orton-Gillingham.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's just a different way of thinking and a different way of looking at things
Yeah.
that can be really applied to many things.
Is it is it a new system, and or do you think that it's going to be adopted by schools more and more, or is it maybe it's been around for, I don't know, tens and 50
It's been
years and
around for a long time. I don't know the answer to that question of when,
yeah.
um, it was all originated, but it's yes, it's been around for a long time. And it's been refined. They're updating things, each time they do trainings, they add things to it.
Uh-huh.
They have people that they employ regularly, they get teachers doing great ideas and they'll see, a video posted on YouTube and then the company will hire them to get more creative,
Ah,
come to our creative team,
yeah,
and so there are a lot of fun things that are being done using the theories and the concepts that are fun for the kids. So they
that's
keep
cool.
adding. Yeah,
That's so cool. That's
it
great.
is helpful.
Um, and I don't know, I maybe had touched upon this question. I think we're going to wrap it up pretty soon. What would be a helpful shift in society to improve how we are teaching our kids? And that's probably a great big long 3-hour dissertation.
Mhm.
But if you can
More than
condense it in a
that.
couple of minutes.
Well, you and I had talked earlier, I had mentioned to something that's been coming up for me a lot lately, and it's regarding the communication with the families.
Mhm.
Um, and I think there's opportunity to educate the families on how they can really be a part of the whole community of education and how um, you know, it, being a parent and also learning all of this information as I go along for my work, it amazes me that parents don't have the information that I've been receiving.
Yeah,
And being able to support their children in a way, like having that report, having those testing done, but also having um, I just feel like more communication, more roundtable with, parents involved. That's
yeah,
not the reporting at a conference or the progress report. I think there's a place for families to get involved because if they don't know the depths of it, they don't know how to improve the system with the teachers and with with their children. So
yeah.
I feel like there's room for that. There's room for more of a community building that draws in families into the education system.
That would be great. That's a great thought indeed. Yeah. Gives the family and the parents a little bit of a feeling of ownership and some, not control, but ownership of what's going on with their kids
Right.
in
And
this.
it's interesting when you think about, parents went to school and they think of school as what they experienced, and so that's going to be what everybody imagines school is going forward, generation after generation, and um, as time goes on and so many other things evolve, it'd be really nice to see, a bigger evolvement of school systems and school communities, just like the rest of the world is evolving,
Yeah,
at greater speeds, I feel.
yeah. Oh, so true, so true. All right. Well, Allison, is there anything that you would like to add? This has been heartwarming for one thing, that the education system is not a disaster and there's certainly room for improvement. And you gave some great ideas of how we can move forward. Um, and there are many different ways of educating our kids. And the Montessori was just, from what you're talking about, it's totally a feel good. I don't know how you can go wrong with it, basically. But is there anything else that you'd like to add to all of what you've already told us about?
No, I would just one thing I would love to add just at the end is just remembering to just going easy and taking pause. I mean, one of the biggest things that I have recognized a need for that helped me through the pandemic and then is helping me work with children is just reminding everyone to be a little bit mindful of just how they're arriving, mindful of how they're doing their work, mindful of the successes that they have, and just looking at the positive side of things, because we can get so caught up on what's not going right, and
Yeah,
just, really being in the moment and being able to stop and focus on, prioritize what we want to focus on, and prioritize what we're going to get done, and not
right.
worry about what's not getting done.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I don't always, but I like to think that I try to end these things on a light note, like just lighten up on yourself. It's really all going to be okay. We can take it really seriously, and like you say, see all the problems that are happening around us. But if you like, it's a great suggestion of yours. Pause and take a look at the good and lighten up. Go easier on yourself. Sometimes you need to
Mhm.
go easier on your kids too, but to lighten up and
Yeah.
enjoy what's in front of you.
Well, if you go easy on yourself and you lighten up on yourself, they're going to see that, and you will automatically be lighter on them as
Yep.
well. If you're hard on yourself, you might be hard on those around you. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Good point. All right. Well, Alison Van Keuren, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it. I'm sure all of the listeners have enjoyed it also. And you take care. And to everybody out there who's been listening, hope you've enjoyed this conversation with Alison. And I will see you next episode. Thank you.